There's something a bit strange about Stewie Griffin when you stop and actually think about him. Not the obvious strangeness, and not the British accent or the football-shaped head or the fact that he built a working time machine before he could reliably feed himself with a spoon. I mean the stranger kind of strangeness. The kind that sneaks up on you after you've watched a lot of Family Guy and you realise that Stewie is probably the most genuinely complicated character the show ever produced. Which is a peculiar thing to say about a baby in a yellow onesie who spent the first 3 seasons of the show trying to murder his mother. But here we are. Tonight we're going to go through Stewie's entire story, season by season, era by era, invention by invention. Not as a trivia dump, not as a greatest hits reel, but as an actual narrative. Because it turns out there is one. Hidden underneath all the cutaway gags and the elaborate schemes and the accent that the show eventually admitted was fake the whole time, there's a character who grew and changed and became something nobody quite expected, including, probably, the people who made him. So get comfortable. This isn't going anywhere fast. We've got time. I'll say up front that if you're already drifting a bit, that's absolutely fine. Every section tonight is its own thing. You won't miss a payoff if you fall asleep somewhere in the middle. That's sort of the point. We're just going to wander through Quahog together at whatever pace feels right, and I'll tell you everything I know about this strange, brilliant, deeply lonely baby. A quick note, I've been sitting with this show for a long time. I have opinions, I'll share them freely, and occasionally I'll catch myself getting more invested than is probably warranted in the emotional arc of a cartoon infant. Fair warning, this is that kind of video. And if you want to stick around for more, if you like this particular brand of very relaxed, very detailed character deep dives, the subscribe button is there. No pressure, but it'd be nice. Since we're here, a brief word on why Stewie specifically works for this format. Sleep content, the kind of video you put on at midnight when your brain is too loud for silence, but too tired for anything demanding, has a particular set of requirements. The voice has to be familiar enough to be comforting. The subject matter has to be interesting enough to occupy the mind without spiking it into alertness. And crucially, nothing should require you to be actively watching. You should be able to close your eyes partway through and still be getting something from it, still be following the thread loosely in the comfortable halfway place between paying attention and not. Stewie works for this because his story is known. Most of you who've clicked on this video have watched at least some Family Guy. You have the images in your head already. The football-shaped head, the yellow onesie, the expression of mild contempt that is his default facial setting. You don't need to see anything to follow along. The material is already there in your memory, and what this video does is give you a way to move through it slowly and at your own pace, finding the bits that connect and the details you hadn't quite noticed before. That's the hope anyway. Actually, before we dive in, a small digression that I think is worth having. I've been watching Family Guy on and off since it first aired, which makes me feel quite old to say out loud. But there it is. And for most of that time, I think I thought of Stewie the way most casual viewers do, as a fun background presence. The evil baby, the one who says preposterous things in a posh accent. The character you put on a t-shirt. I appreciated him without particularly thinking about him. And then at some point, I genuinely don't remember which episode triggered it, I started paying closer attention. And what I found was that there's an actual story running underneath all the chaos. Not a dramatic arc in the traditional sense. Not something the show announced and built toward. More like a quiet accumulation of detail that, if you step back and look at all of it together, forms a portrait of someone genuinely interesting and not entirely comfortable to look at directly. That's what tonight is, a chance to step back and look at all of it together. One thing worth mentioning before we dive in, I'll be moving through the seasons in rough order, but this isn't going to be a blow-by-blow episode guide. We're not cataloguing every single thing Stewie has ever done. What we're doing is tracing the shape of the character, how he started, how he changed, what the writers seemed to be figuring out along the way, and where all of it eventually landed. Some episodes will get a lot of attention, some will get a brief mention. Some famous moments you might be expecting won't come up until they fit naturally. The general shape of what's coming. We'll start with Stewie's origins and the version of the character we met in the early seasons, then move into the long, strange middle era where the show figured out what he was actually for, and then we'll spend some real time on the episodes that broke the character open in ways that are still a bit startling to think about. The therapy episode alone could fill a video. We won't let it fill this one, but it'll get the space it deserves. There are also several things about Stewie that the show has never fully resolved, and I think that's intentional. Whether the accent is part of a deeper psychological defense, whether his genius is permanent or something he's destined to lose, whether any of the other characters actually hear him most of the time, or whether the conversations he has with Brian are somehow happening on a different frequency from the rest of the household. We'll get into all of that. None of it will be definitively answered because the show won't allow it, but it's worth sitting with the questions. All right, MacFarlane, Fox, 1998. Let's go. Seth MacFarlane was 24 years old when he pitched Family Guy to Fox. 24, which is a piece of information that becomes more remarkable the longer you sit with it. He walked into a network meeting, pitched a 15-minute animated pilot, and walked out with a television series. The entire thing moved so fast that MacFarlane later admitted he didn't entirely know how to run a show when they handed him one. He figured it out as he went, which if you watch the first couple of seasons of Family Guy, you can sort of feel. The show grew out of 2 short films MacFarlane had made at the Rhode Island School of Design, The Life of Larry and Steve. These were student films basically, and they contained the seeds of what would become the Griffin family. Larry became Peter, Steve, a talking dog, became Brian. The world of Quahog was already taking shape in embryo form inside these scrappy, hand-drawn little shorts from a college kid in Providence. There's a version of this story where the shorts feel like rough drafts, slightly embarrassing juvenilia that MacFarlane would rather not have people dig up. But when you watch them, they're actually quite good, specifically because you can feel in them what MacFarlane was interested in. The talking dog who's smarter than the humans around him. The domestic setting used as a backdrop for characters who don't quite fit inside it. The sense that something genuinely strange is happening in a very ordinary Rhode Island house. All of that made it into Family Guy intact. Stewie was not in those films. Stewie came later, and he came with a very specific design brief. He was supposed to be a parody of a certain kind of television villain, the grandiose, scheming, theatrical type who announces their plans in complete sentences with unnecessarily elaborate vocabulary and then fails because the universe refuses to take them seriously. Think Bond villain, but smaller, much smaller, wearing a onesie. The voice came from Rex Harrison, specifically from Harrison's performance as Professor Henry Higgins in My Fair Lady. That theatrical, faintly condescending, vowel-rich posh English voice that signals intelligence and social superiority in a very particular, very British way. MacFarlane has said he leaned into this because the contrast between the voice and the body was where the joke lived. A baby sounding like a Mayfair gentleman was inherently absurd. And absurdity was the point. There's a specific quality to the Henry Higgins voice that's worth understanding, because I think it shapes Stewie in ways people don't always articulate. Higgins, in My Fair Lady, is a man obsessed with elocution as a marker of class and intelligence. A man who believes that how you speak is who you are. He transforms Eliza Doolittle through accent modification, essentially teaching her to perform a different self through her voice. And there's an enormous irony in the fact that Stewie's voice is a direct descendant of that character, because the therapy episode reveals that Stewie's accent is itself a performance. He is Eliza Doolittle all along. He built a Henry Higgins persona and put it on. The joke runs much deeper than anyone initially noticed. The football-shaped head, though, that wasn't planned. MacFarlane has talked about this in various interviews over the years. He wasn't a particularly skilled animator when he designed the early characters, and Stewie's distinctive head shape was partly just the result of drawing an infant and not being entirely sure what he was doing. The shape stuck. By the time the animation quality improved enough that they could have corrected it, the head had become iconic. So they kept it, and eventually it became such a signature that nobody questioned it anymore. There's something faintly reassuring about that, I think. One of the most recognizable character designs in animated television history is essentially a happy accident. What MacFarlane was actually going for with Stewie, in terms of narrative function, was a specific kind of satirical contrast. Family Guy, in its earliest conception, was a family sitcom, a bit warmer and more grounded than it would eventually become, with real emotional dynamics and character relationships that felt at least somewhat plausible. Peter and Lois actually cared about each other. Meg had storylines where her parents treated her decently. Chris was weird but okay. Into this relatively recognizable domestic world, the writers dropped a baby who spoke like a Victorian aristocrat and was openly plotting mass murder. The incongruity was the point. Stewie existed to remind you that this was not a normal show, even in the moments when it was trying to be one. What the show was also doing, underneath the joke, was exaggerating something real. The experience of being a very young child, completely dependent, unable to communicate what you actually want, surrounded by adults who make decisions about your life without consulting you and are often baffling and frustrating and entirely out of reach, is genuinely maddening if you think about it from the inside. Stewie's murder plots against Lois are, at some level of reading, just what it looks like when you take infant frustration and give it a vocabulary. There's also a class element in the original Stewie that's sometimes overlooked. He's not just intelligent, he's specifically coded as aristocratic, old money, old world, the kind of accent that implies a social stratum several levels above the family he's born into. Peter Griffin is a working class guy from Rhode Island. Stewie sounds like he was born in a manor house in Surrey. The mismatch is comedic, but it also says something about aspiration and belonging, and the gap between who you feel yourself to be and where you actually find yourself. Stewie is a character who believes he is fundamentally in the wrong circumstances. He always has been. The show wouldn't explore that idea explicitly for a long time. For now, Stewie was a gag. A very good one, but a gag. The complications came later. Family Guy premiered on January 31st, 1999, right after Super Bowl 33, and pulled in over 22 million viewers on its debut night. That's a number that doesn't quite mean what it used to mean. This was 1999. There were fewer screens competing for attention, and the Super Bowl lead-in gave it a massive captive audience. But still, 22 million people watched Peter Griffin accept a government welfare check in the pilot episode, and somewhere in the background of that pilot, Stewie Griffin was there, doing something slightly alarming. The pilot is a good place to start with Stewie specifically, because it establishes the rules of his existence in their original, unmodified form. He is present in the domestic scenes. He participates in family activities. He is, by all external appearances, a baby, and then he opens his mouth and says something that no baby has ever said, in a voice that no baby has ever used, and the show just moves on as if this is perfectly fine. That decision to never comment on the strangeness of Stewie, to never have the other characters react with sustained shock or confusion, is one of the best structural choices the early seasons made. It meant that Stewie's presence in any scene carried a low-level surrealism that didn't require explanation. He was simply part of the texture of this world, because early Stewie is played almost entirely straight, which people sometimes forget. The Stewie of seasons 1 through 3 is not a joke character in the sense of being someone the audience is supposed to laugh at with fond affection. He's a joke in a more precise sense. He's a satirical construct, a parody of a specific type of villain. And within the logic of the show, he is a genuine threat. He builds a mind control device. He constructs weapons of varying levels of sophistication. He has actual goals and pursues them with a kind of methodical patience that most of the other characters in the show never come close to. His plans to kill Lois are elaborate and occasionally very nearly successful. There's a scene in the early seasons where Stewie tricks Lois into eating food that he's laced with something, and when she starts feeling the effects, he just watches with quiet satisfaction. It's played for laughs, but the image is genuinely a bit unsettling if you let it land properly. This is a baby who drugged his mother. He's keeping score. The famous "what the deuce" catchphrase, "victory shall be mine, the imperious little wave." All of this was establishing a character who took himself completely seriously as a villain and expected the narrative to as well. And in those early seasons, it mostly did. Stewie's schemes weren't always successful, but they were treated as real. The show wasn't winking at you about them. What's interesting is how much of the early Stewie material is really about communication, or the failure of it. One of the most consistent early gags is that most adults simply can't understand or register what Stewie is saying. He'll deliver a lengthy speech about his plans for world domination, and Lois will respond to something else entirely, or nod vaguely, or just hand him a bottle. There's something in this that's genuinely funny, but also something that's a bit melancholy if you pay attention to it. He has all this intelligence, all this ambition, all this carefully constructed persona, and most of the time, the people around him can't even hear him. Brian can hear him. That's worth noting because it matters later. Brian and Stewie communicate with each other in a way that Stewie doesn't communicate with anyone else in the household. The show establishes this early without making a big thing of it. It's just there, quietly, as a fact of the world. Whether the other family members can or can't hear Stewie, whether they're willfully ignoring him, or genuinely deaf to him, or hearing him and responding on a register we don't see, is one of the show's deliberate ambiguities. But Brian hears him. Always. And that small fact is the foundation of everything that follows. The early seasons also give us some of Stewie's most memorable, standalone moments. The ones that tend to make highlight reels because they capture the original character so cleanly. The ipecac scene. The "victory shall be mine" declaration. The elaborate punishment he devises for a neighbourhood child who touched his toys without permission. These moments are played for comedy, but they work because the show commits to them fully. Stewie in these episodes has a quality of genuine conviction that later seasons sometimes soften. He is certain. He knows what he wants, he knows why he wants it, and he intends to get it. There's something almost restful about a character who is that clear on their own motivations, even if the motivations involve ray guns. Season 2 introduces a recurring element that becomes quietly important: Stewie at play. There are sequences in the early seasons where Stewie interacts with toys and imaginary scenarios in ways that briefly make him look like exactly what he is: a toddler, with a toddler's capacity for elaborate, imaginative play. The show uses these moments mostly for contrast comedy, cutting from Stewie's grandiose pronouncements to him pushing a toy truck around the floor. But if you look at them alongside the therapy episode, they take on a different quality. The imaginative play and the supervillain schemes are not so different from each other. Both are Stewie constructing a reality he finds more bearable than the one he's actually in. The Season 2 episode, 15 Minutes of Shame, has a moment I always think about when I think about early Stewie, because it shows him in an unusually vulnerable position. The family's chaos has gotten them onto a reality television program, and in the process, the real Griffins are replaced by actors playing them. A different actor plays Stewie, blonder, softer, none of the menace, and Stewie watches this other version of himself and seems genuinely disturbed. Not because the replacement baby is threatening him, because the replacement baby is nicer, more palatable, and audiences seem to prefer him. The episode doesn't dwell on this. It's mostly a satirical riff on reality TV, but there's a moment in it that reads differently once you've seen the therapy episode. A moment where Stewie looks at a version of himself that's been sanded down for mass consumption and reacts with something that looks like recognition of a fear. The fear that maybe the persona, the one he built, isn't what people actually want, that the real self under the performance is even less appealing than the performance is. That's early Stewie, constructing armor before he even knows what he's armored against. The ray gun is another early fixture. Stewie has a ray gun, a proper science fiction weapon that he built, apparently, in whatever passes for a laboratory in his bedroom at 31 Spooner Street. He uses it on occasion. He threatens people with it. Again, the show doesn't treat this as particularly unusual within its own logic. This is a baby who has access to a functional, directed energy weapon, and the show's response is, sure, why not? One other thing about early Stewie that's easy to miss: the accent is treated as completely real in the early seasons. Nobody comments on it. Nobody asks why the infant has a plummy, mid-Atlantic adjacent British accent. It's just accepted. The show won't revisit this question for many years, and when it does, the answer it gives is one of the most interesting things it ever did with the character. And a note on Seth MacFarlane's performance, which deserves mention: MacFarlane has been voicing Stewie continuously since the pilot, and the physicality of the voice performance has always been impressive. Stewie speaks in complete, elaborate sentences. He delivers complicated vocabulary with natural rhythm. He expresses a full emotional range without the voice becoming inconsistent. This is the same person who also voices Peter Griffin, Brian Griffin, and Glenn Quagmire, sometimes in the same scene, sometimes in the same exchange. The technical achievement of holding 4 distinctly different vocal identities simultaneously for 25 years is remarkable, and it's easy to take for granted because the voices are so familiar. For now though, in Season 1 and into Season 2, Stewie is an archetype. The evil genius, the miniature supervillain. He has a nemesis, Lois, a sidekick relationship developing, Brian, and a laboratory. He's got more of a setup than most actual cartoon villains. He just also happens to still need someone to do up his buttons. Here's something that often gets glossed over in the Family Guy story. The show didn't just get cancelled once and then come back. It ran, got cancelled, came back, ran some more, got cancelled again, and then got revived a second time. And the show, that eventually returned in 2005, was operating in a meaningfully different context than the one that originally premiered in 1999. Fox pulled the plug after Season 3 in 2002. Low ratings, scheduling issues, general network jitteriness about a show that was costing money without quite justifying the spend. The cancellation was real. The final Season 3 episodes didn't even all air on Fox. Some of them found their way to Adult Swim later. One detail that often gets overlooked in the revival story: MacFarlane himself was reportedly somewhat relieved when the cancellation happened the first time. He'd been running every aspect of the show, writing, voice acting, overseeing production, at a pace that wasn't sustainable. When Fox pulled the plug, the burnout was already significant. He thought his animation career might be over, and also that he could finally breathe again. Two things can be true, and here's the thing about cancellation. From a character development perspective, it freezes things. Whatever Stewie was becoming, whatever arcs were being planned, whatever ideas the writers had for where he might go, all of that just stopped. There were apparently plans for longer serialized Stewie storylines in the early seasons that never got made. We'll never know exactly what they were, but the implication is that the early seasons supervillain version of Stewie might have evolved into something different, along a different path, if the show had been allowed to continue uninterrupted. Instead, there was the gap. Adult Swim started airing reruns. DVD sales absolutely exploded. The Season 1 set became one of the best-selling TV show DVD releases of its era. A whole new audience found the show through these two channels, and that audience was younger and had different expectations and was responding to the show in different ways than the original broadcast audience had. The ratings for the Adult Swim reruns were higher than the original broadcast numbers. Fox noticed. Fox brought the show back in 2005, but 4 years had passed. The culture had shifted in the ways cultures do. The internet had become a different, more present thing. The audience was different, and in some quiet way that's hard to articulate but easy to feel. When you watch the show, the writers were different too. They'd had time to think. They'd had time to think about what they'd actually made. The gap years were also, in retrospect, a period when the show's reputation was quietly being built by people who'd found it through those Adult Swim reruns and DVD sets. These weren't people who'd watched the original broadcast run. They came to Family Guy out of order, sometimes, or in chunks, or late at night when Adult Swim was doing its thing, and they happened to stumble across it. And they responded to specific things in the show that the original broadcast audience had been less focused on. The Stewie and Brian material, as mentioned earlier, but also the show's particular quality of surrealism, the way it could go from a domestic scene to something completely untethered, and then back again without explanation. Stewie, specifically, embodied this quality more than any other character. He was the element of the show that could go anywhere, tonally and narratively, without breaking the show's internal logic. Because from the very first episode, Stewie had existed outside normal cause and effect. He was the signal that anything was permitted. When the show came back in 2005 and the writers understood, now, who their actual audience was, what those people responded to, what had caught in the culture, Stewie's role in the show started to expand accordingly. Not immediately, and not through a single conscious decision, but gradually, through the accumulation of choices that prioritized what worked best. And what worked best, it turned out, was giving Stewie someone to talk to. The Stewie who came back in season 4 was starting to become something other than a straight parody of a villain archetype. The transition was gradual and not always deliberate feeling, but it was there. Something had softened or deepened, or, more accurately, the show had started to become genuinely curious about what was inside this character, rather than just using him as a satirical device. Shows that survive cancellation tend to be a little self-aware. They know they were nearly gone. That awareness colours things. And for Stewie specifically, the post-cancellation era is where the show stopped treating him as a punchline and started treating him as a person. An extremely small, extremely armed person, granted. But a person. The DVD sales numbers are worth mentioning here because they tell you something about which parts of the show people responded to most strongly in rewatching. Reviewers and fans who came to the show through the Adult Swim reruns and the DVD sets often cited Stewie and Brian material as the thing that kept them watching. Not the Peter plots, not the cutaway gags, though those were obviously part of the appeal, but specifically the scenes with these two characters sitting in a room together, being honest with each other in ways the rest of the show rarely managed. The audience saw something in that dynamic, and when the show came back, the writers had seen the same thing. The revival season, season 4, is where you can start to see the show working out what Stewie actually is. He's still doing villainous things. He still has the plans, the weapons, the accent. But there's a looseness to it now, a quality of the show using these things as shorthand rather than as active storytelling. The elaborate murder plots have become a bit of a callback to the character's original identity rather than the plot engine they used to be. Something else is quietly taking their place. The centerpiece of this shift is Stewie Griffin, The Untold Story, which came out in 2005 as a direct-to-DVD feature. It was later broken into 3 broadcast episodes. Stewie Be Good, Bango was his name, Oh, and Stu and Stewie's Excellent Adventure. But the full version plays as one continuous story, and it's the first time the show gave Stewie something like an interior life to actually explore. The first part of the movie, Stewie Be Good, begins with Stewie having what appears to be a near-death experience. He slips, falls into a pool, nearly drowns, and has a vision of what awaits him if he doesn't change his ways. The vision is comedic, but the effect on Stewie is genuine. He spends several episodes being noticeably less murderous, more reflective, more interested in the people around him. This version of Stewie is a bit odd to watch because he's warmer and more accessible, and simultaneously less interesting. The performance and the menace are part of what makes Stewie compelling. Without them, he's just a smart baby, and the world has plenty of those. The second segment, Bango Was His Name. O is where the road trip proper begins. Stewie and Brian travel to San Francisco with Quagmire, an unusual pairing because Quagmire and Stewie don't have a natural dynamic, which the show wisely uses for comedy, following the lead of the man Stewie has seen on television. There's a car chase, a trolley car, various complications. It's adventure comedy in a more conventional mode than the show usually produces. The premise starts with Stewie having a near-death experience that causes him to reassess his priorities. He becomes temporarily less homicidal, more domestically oriented, and then, while watching television, he sees a man who looks exactly like him, an adult version of him, and he becomes convinced that this man is his real father, which would explain the accent, the head shape, the genius, all of it. The theory being that if he finds his real father, he'll understand himself. The road trip that follows takes him through a cross-country journey with Quagmire, of all people, and Brian eventually arriving in San Francisco, and what he finds there, sitting next to him on a trolley car reading a newspaper, is Stewie Griffin, an adult version of himself who is not a supervillain, not a genius revolutionary, not even particularly remarkable. Stu is ordinary. He has a desk job and a quiet life, and nothing especially dramatic to say for himself. And Stewie, faced with this vision of his own future, does not accept it. He destroys the future self rather than let that version of him exist. Think about that for a moment. The character, who spent 3 seasons plotting world domination, is given a glimpse of who he'll become. And the thing he can't tolerate about that future isn't failure. It's mediocrity. It's the prospect of being ordinary. He'd rather unmake his future self entirely than accept the possibility that all the ambition and intelligence and performance amounts to a man reading the arts section on a trolley car in San Francisco. It's also worth noting the specific nature of Stew's ordinariness. He isn't unhappy. He isn't a failure in the conventional sense. He has a life. He seems reasonably content. What he doesn't have is significance. He doesn't have a mark on the world, and that for Stewie is worse than any catastrophe. Contentment without impact is the thing he cannot face. This is the first time the show gives us a real window into what's driving Stewie. Not villainy, not genuine evil. Terror, basically. Terror of being nobody. The murder plots and the ray guns and the accent, they're all armour. They're all a way of insisting on significance. And when the show shows him an unarmoured future self, he destroys it. It's a surprisingly layered bit of writing for a DVD movie about a cartoon baby. And it establishes something the show will keep returning to for the next 20 seasons. Around this same period, Brian and Stewie's friendship starts becoming the show's most interesting relationship. Not just a useful comedic pairing, though it is that, but something with genuine warmth and genuine stakes to it. The writers seem to discover that putting these two characters in a room together produced something that neither of them produced on their own. Brian's melancholy and self-doubt and alcoholism rubbing up against Stewie's performance and ambition and deeply buried loneliness. They made each other funnier and occasionally more real. It's worth saying something about why this pairing works from a character dynamics perspective. Brian, for all his pretensions, is fundamentally a warm character. He likes people. He's bad at showing it sometimes, and he's often self-absorbed, but there's a genuine generosity underneath the affected intellectual pose. And Stewie, who has built his entire persona around not needing people, is extremely good at detecting warmth in others, and extremely bad at admitting that it matters to him. Brian offers warmth without making a big thing of it. Stewie accepts it without acknowledging he's doing so. The friendship functions in the space where neither of them has to admit what's happening. This is, incidentally, a very recognizable dynamic. Lots of close friendships operate on this principle, where the care is real and mutual, but neither party's ready to say so plainly, and the whole relationship runs on comfortable deflection and shared activity, and the occasional moment where the deflection breaks down and something true surfaces briefly before both parties agree to pretend it didn't happen. The road to episodes are full of these moments. The Vault episode is one extended version of it. The character work in these years is the show figuring out this dynamic and learning to trust it. The Lois murder plots quietly became less frequent during this era. They didn't disappear entirely, but they stopped being the engine of Stewie's storylines and started being a kind of occasional reflex, like he'd remember they were supposed to be a thing, and then give it a half-hearted go before moving on to whatever was actually interesting about the episode. He went from plotting to dominate the world to making a best friend. That's either character growth or the show running out of ideas. Probably, if we're being honest, a bit of both. But the friendship worked, and that's what mattered. Now let's talk about the road to series properly, because it deserves its own section. These are the episodes, there are roughly 10 of them across the show's run, where Stewie and Brian go somewhere together. Not in a casual sense. They go somewhere properly, usually across several locations, usually involving some kind of escalating chaos, always returning home. They sing together in these episodes, which is its own thing. They bicker. They protect each other. They have conversations that wouldn't work with any other pairing of characters in the show's universe. The first one, Road to Rhode Island in Season 2, is the one that invented the format. The setup is straightforward enough. Brian is supposed to pick up Stewie from his grandparents in Texas and bring him home. The situation spirals. They end up road tripping together, running into trouble, and at one point sitting together in a field and doing a musical number that's genuinely lovely, actually. On the Road to Rhode Island is a song that works better than it has any right to, given that it's being sung by an alcoholic dog and an evil baby in a Fox animated series. The song has a specific quality that I think explains why it lands. It's performed with complete sincerity. There's no wink to the audience, no acknowledgement of the absurdity. Stewie and Brian just sing it, and it sounds like two people who are genuinely glad to be in each other's company, even though one of them is a baby and one of them is a dog. And neither of them would openly admit this gladness under any other circumstances. That's the thing about music in the Road to episodes. The show uses it as a kind of truth serum. Characters say things in song that they can't say in dialogue. It's a theatrical convention, as old as musical theatre, and the show deploys it with surprising precision. When Stewie sings in these episodes, he's not performing. The persona steps aside. Whatever he says in a song is as close to his real interior as the show usually gets. That episode established that these two characters had chemistry that was different from anything else in the show, and the writers noticed. Road to Europe in Season 3 went further with it. Stewie runs away to find the creators of his favourite show, Mother Pewterschmidt. He's apparently a fan of British children's television, and ends up on a bizarre odyssey that eventually includes Kiss's tour bus. Brian chases after him. They're separated, they find each other, they come home. The structure of these episodes is very consistent. Separation, reunion, home. It's a kind of reassurance built into the format. Road to Rupert in Season 5 is one I have particular affection for, because it strips the adventure element back a bit and lets the friendship breathe. Stewie is trying to track down his stuffed bear Rupert, who was accidentally sold at a garage sale. Brian helps him. They go to Aspen. There's skiing. The whole thing is a bit gentler than some of the others, and it shows how much the writers trusted the Brian and Stewie dynamic by this point to just carry an episode without an elaborate external threat. Road to Germany in Season 7 is the one that goes to the darkest actual place, geographically. They accidentally end up in 1939 Warsaw, September 1st, 1939, to be precise, which is the day of the Nazi invasion of Poland. While trying to rescue Mort Goldman, who'd accidentally activated Stewie's time machine. Stewie disguises himself as Hitler at one point to obtain uranium fuel for the return pad. It's played for comedy, but the episode doesn't completely defang the historical setting. There's a weight to being in that time and place, even in a cartoon about a talking baby. What I think works about this episode is how unflappable Stewie is in it. He lands in one of the most dangerous moments in 20th century history, processes it fairly quickly, and starts problem solving. Not because he's callous, the episode shows him taking the stakes seriously, but because Stewie is fundamentally a solutions-oriented character. Given an obstacle, even a Nazi-occupied Warsaw-shaped obstacle, he immediately starts working on how to navigate it. That pragmatism is one of the things that makes him compelling company for this kind of adventure. Then there's Road to the Multiverse in Season 8, which is the one that IMDb users have collectively rated the highest of any Family Guy episode, sitting at 9.1 out of 10. That number is real, and I find it fascinating because the episode is wonderful but also quite silly, which perhaps is exactly the combination that makes something rate that highly. Stewie has built a multiverse remote. He takes Brian on a tour of alternate universes, one where Christianity never existed, and therefore no dark ages, resulting in extraordinarily advanced technology and a remarkably attractive Meg. A Flintstones universe, a Disney-style universe where everything is animated in that particular saturated, round-edged way. A universe where humans are subservient to dogs, which Brian finds enormously appealing. A robot chicken universe, which is a very specific meta-joke that probably aged better than expected. The remote eventually gets broken. They have to find their way home. The dog-ruled universe deserves a brief additional note, because the show uses it to quietly expose something about Brian's character. Given a world where his species is in charge, Brian immediately relaxes and starts enjoying himself in a way he doesn't in regular Quahog. He's comfortable, he fits, and Stewie watches this with a particular expression that's easy to miss. A small, slightly sad recognition that Brian is happier in a world without the constraints he lives under in the real one. The episode doesn't make a big deal of this. It moves on. But it's there. It's a playful episode, but what it also does is establish definitively that Stewie has solved the multiverse. He built a working device that accesses parallel dimensions of reality. He uses it to show his dog friend various amusing alternate realities. The gap between what Stewie is capable of and how seriously anyone around him takes it is one of the show's persistent running jokes, and this episode pushes it to an extreme. Road to the North Pole in Season 9 is a Christmas episode, and it's a bit darker than you'd expect a Christmas special to be. Stewie and Brian go to the North Pole to confront Santa Claus, initially out of vengeance, and find him genuinely ill and overworked, essentially a broken version of a figure who's supposed to represent generosity and joy. It's a bit melancholy. The show earns some genuine feeling with it. Road to the Pilot in Season 10 goes full meta. They travel back in time to the show's own pilot episode, and Stewie meets a past version of Brian who doesn't know him yet. It's a strange, fun episode about continuity and time and the weird self-awareness of a show that's been running long enough to reference its own history. What connects all of these is the relationship. Each Road to episode is, in its bones, a story about Stewie and Brian and what they mean to each other. The adventures are the container, the friendship is the point. And the show figured out fairly early that this was a friendship worth investing in, that whatever Stewie would become as a character, Brian would be central to it. There's also something about the Road to format that serves Stewie specifically, which is that it removes him from the domestic context where he's defined as the baby. On the road, he's just a person. He makes decisions. He navigates situations. He takes care of Brian in the practical sense of knowing how things work and where to go and what to do. The parental dynamic of the Griffin household, where Stewie is the smallest and least powerful, gets inverted. He's often the one who knows what he's doing, and that competence freed from the setting where it goes unrecognized, is a pleasure to watch. Every one of these episodes is a love letter to a friendship that shouldn't work at all, a homicidal baby and a sad alcoholic dog. But it does work, and the show knew it. Now we're getting into territory that the show sort of threw out there casually and never fully reckoned with, which is very on brand for Family Guy. The Big Bang Theory. Season 9, Episode 16, is an episode that starts with Stewie wanting to go back in time to deliver a better comeback to Brian. He'd said something weak, Brian had laughed at him, and Stewie, being Stewie, decided the appropriate response was to build a time machine and retroactively fix the embarrassment. Reasonable, very normal behaviour for a child with access to temporal mechanics. The earlier part of the episode is actually quite funny in a low-key way. Stewie keeps going back to deliver increasingly elaborate retorts, each one getting further from the original conversation. Brian getting more confused each time. It's a comedic escalation that's very much in the style of how the show uses time travel, as a premise for jokes rather than plot complexity. And then things escalate past jokes entirely. Stewie and Brian end up fighting over control of the time machine and accidentally get launched outside the space-time continuum, a place where the laws of physics don't apply and the return pad can't function. To get back, Stewie has to overload the return pad, which will cause an explosion that propels them back to the present. He does. It works. And then, in the aftermath, Stewie does some research and discovers something. His explosion was the Big Bang. He created the universe, all of it. Every star, every planet, every atom of matter and energy in existence. Stewie Griffin is responsible for it. He was launched outside of space-time. He created an explosion to escape. And that explosion, 14 billion years ago, from the perspective of everyone else, is what started everything. The show doesn't dwell on this for very long. It moves on fairly quickly, the way Family Guy tends to move on, from revelations that would stop other shows entirely. But the implication sits there. If you take the show's own internal logic seriously, and why not? It's more fun. Stewie is the most cosmically significant being in existence. He didn't just build a time machine, he created time itself. The episode has an additional layer with Bertram, who is Stewie's half-brother, through Peter's sperm donation history. Bertram discovers Stewie's invention and travels back in time to prevent Stewie from ever being born, reasoning that if Stewie doesn't exist, he can't create the Big Bang, and therefore all of existence is unmade. As plans go, it's committed, maximally committed. You have to respect the ambition, even while rooting for it not to work. This leads Stewie to discover that Leonardo da Vinci is his ancestor, because he and Bertram share Peter's DNA, and Bertram has gone back to 15th century Venice to kill da Vinci. Stewie follows. Stewie saves da Vinci. The universe continues to exist. The Bertram episodes more broadly are interesting because Bertram functions as a dark mirror for Stewie. He looks identical, he's comparably intelligent, and he chose a different path. Where Stewie's villainy has always been performance, Bertram's is genuine. He actually wants destruction. He actually means it. And watching the two of them in opposition, you get a sense of how much space there is between what Stewie performs and what he actually is. Stewie saves da Vinci. Stewie saves the universe. The real villain here is the other one, the one who committed fully to what Stewie only ever played at. So Stewie Griffin, in the course of one episode, caused the Big Bang, saved his ancestor, Leonardo da Vinci, and preserved the existence of all matter and energy. He did this because he wanted to win an argument with his dog. There's something very funny about the scale of this, but also something that becomes quietly strange when you think about the broader arc of the character. Stewie is always accidentally becoming more important than anyone knows. He's the baby who nobody hears properly. He's the character the other Griffins treat as background furniture. And yet in the cosmology of the Family Guy universe, he is the reason anything exists at all. The show uses this and then doesn't use it. By the next episode, it's as if it never happened. Nobody refers back to the Big Bang revelation. Stewie doesn't bring it up. the universe just goes on, blissfully unaware that it owes its existence to a toddler in Rhode Island who was annoyed about a joke. I don't know if I find that funnier or more poignant. A bit of both, probably. Since we're on the topic of Stewie's scientific output, let's just wander through some of it. Not in a comprehensive listicle way, more the way you'd wander through someone's workshop, stopping at the things that catch your eye. The time machine is the obvious centerpiece. Stewie has built multiple versions of it across the show's run. The first one's a relatively straightforward affair. You get in, you set coordinates, you go. Later versions get more complicated, partly because the show had established enough temporal physics within its own universe that the writers had to be careful about internal consistency. The return pad is a related but separate device, a smaller, more portable thing that allows travel back to the present from a fixed point in the past. Stewie loses or destroys the return pad with some regularity. This is a running problem. You'd think he'd make backups. The multiverse remote is a separate invention, not time travel, but parallel universe access. Different mechanism, different rules. Stewie built it, and it worked perfectly, right up until Brian knocked it onto the pavement. There's also the shrink ray, which appears in early seasons and is genuinely impressive from an engineering standpoint if you think about what it would actually require to build. The mind control device, which was more of an early seasons fixture and gradually fell out of rotation. Various weapons of varying sophistication, some of which are never named and appear in a single episode for a single gag. His robot double is worth mentioning. At one point, Stewie built a robot version of himself, which is the kind of thing you do when you need to attend a social obligation but have better things to do. The existence of this robot raises questions the show has no particular interest in answering, like, how do you build a robot that perfectly replicates your own voice and behaviour? And what does it say about your self-conception that you apparently can? A robot double implies that you understand yourself well enough to replicate yourself mechanically. That's a level of self-knowledge most people never reach, and Stewie apparently acquired it as a side project. And then there's the teleporter, which comes up occasionally, and which Stewie treats as slightly less impressive than the time machine. The way you treat a really good pair of headphones as slightly less impressive than the thing that made the Big Bang. The weapons deserve a brief note. Early seasons established Stewie with a ray gun, a proper science fiction directed energy weapon, which he built and uses without particular ceremony. There are also various poisons, traps, and mechanisms of harm that appear across the seasons, some named and some not. What's interesting about the evolution of the weapons is that they become less prominent as the show goes on. Not because Stewie becomes less dangerous exactly, but because the show found more interesting things to do with his intellect than have him point things at Lois. The weapons are still there, presumably. They've just been deprioritized. What's remarkable about all of this, and this is something the show returns to periodically with a kind of affectionate absurdity, is that nobody cares. The Griffin family occupies the same house as a baby who has almost certainly built the most technologically advanced laboratory in human history, somewhere adjacent to his bedroom, and their response is essentially to make sure he finishes his vegetables. Lois occasionally clears things off his shelf. Peter has probably knocked something important over on the way to the bathroom at 3 a.m. The gap between what Stewie is and what the people around him perceive him to be is, quietly, one of the funniest jokes in the whole show. And it's not a joke that needs to be set up or paid off. It just exists, sitting there in the background of every scene he's in. Here's a fun detail I think about occasionally. Stewie's lab is presumably in or adjacent to his room at 31 Spooner Street, which means that at some point someone helped set it up, or at least allowed its equipment to be installed. Did Peter help assemble some kind of device, thinking it was a particularly elaborate toy? Did Lois look in one day and see a centrifuge and just quietly close the door? We don't know. The show doesn't say. This is the kind of question that gets more interesting the less you try to answer it. Now and then the show acknowledges the absurdity of this directly. A moment where someone wanders into Stewie's room, briefly notices that it contains what appears to be a particle accelerator, and then wanders back out. But mostly, it just lets the contradiction sit there. It's become part of the background of the show's world. Stewie has a lab, obviously. Where else would he keep it? There's also the question of funding, which nobody raises and the show wisely ignores. Building functional time machines and multiverse remotes presumably requires materials, components, energy sources of various descriptions. Where does the money come from? Stewie doesn't have a job. He doesn't have an allowance, or if he does, it isn't nearly enough for plutonium. The economy of his laboratory is as inexplicable as everything else about him, and I've decided this is part of the joke rather than a plot hole. The remarkable thing about Stewie's lab isn't any single invention. It's that he's been building this stuff for over 25 years of television, and everyone in the family still treats him like he can't reach the kitchen counter, which, to be fair, he probably can't. Let's talk about the Lois murder plots more carefully, because they're worth understanding as a through line rather than just a collection of gags. In the early seasons, as we covered, these are played as genuine threats. Stewie wants to kill Lois. He has reasons mostly to do with her authority over him, her ability to restrict his freedom of movement, her general existence as the person responsible for making him eat food he doesn't like and go to bed on a schedule he finds insulting. The reasons are exaggerated for satirical effect, but they have a real emotional logic if you extend them far enough. It's worth noting that the Lois murder plots in Season 1 specifically have a quality that the later ones don't quite replicate. They're patient. Stewie doesn't just try to shoot Lois in Season 1, he plans. He sets up elaborate multi-stage schemes. He has contingency plans. He evaluates what went wrong and adjusts. This is a baby operating with the strategic discipline of someone who takes the Enterprise seriously and intends to succeed. The fact that he doesn't succeed is partly luck and partly Lois being more resilient than she appears, but never for lack of effort on Stewie's part. By Season 3, the murder plots have already started becoming more reflexive, more joke-shaped than threat-shaped. The show was developing other interests. The murder attempts become more elaborate as the seasons progress, and then they become the basis for what is probably the most ambitious Stewie storyline the show had produced up to that point. The two-part Stewie kills Lois/Lois kills Stewie arc in Season 6. In these episodes, Stewie actually does it. He kills Lois. She's shot and dropped into the ocean during a cruise, and Peter is eventually convicted of her murder. Then in the second episode, Lois comes back. She survived, she was rescued, and spent a year recovering on an island. And when she returns, Stewie's response is to escalate. He takes over the world. He actually does it. With the weapons and the plans he's been stockpiling for seasons, he successfully executes a global takeover and installs himself as planetary dictator. And then it's revealed to be a simulation. Stewie ran the whole scenario in a computer program to see how it would play out. None of it actually happened. The show reset to its status quo. This reveal frustrated a lot of viewers at the time, and you can understand why. The show had committed so fully to the scenario, both episodes are genuinely tense in a way Family Guy rarely is, that the simulation reveal felt like a retraction, like the writers had gone somewhere and then immediately backed out. But I've come around to thinking there's something interesting in this structurally. The simulation means that Stewie did all of this in his head. He played through his deepest fantasy, killing Lois, conquering the world, and then put it away. He ran the scenario not to live it, but to know it, and having known it, he seems to let it go. There's also a detail in the simulation that I think gets overlooked. In the simulation, Stewie wins. He actually takes over the world. He installs himself as planetary dictator and the plan works. And having achieved the thing he spent seasons supposedly wanting, the episode reveals something quietly devastating. It isn't enough. World domination is not what Stewie actually needs. It's what he says he needs, because saying you need world domination is a way of not having to say anything more vulnerable. But the simulation plays it out and arrives at an empty victory. And I think that's deliberate. The lowest murder attempts after season 6 are distinctly less frequent, less committed, more like reflexes than ambitions. He got the ending he always said he wanted, and it wasn't enough. Around season 7 and 8, you can feel the show trying to figure out what to do with Stewie now that his central dramatic motivation, killing Lois, has been quietly shelved. What they land on mostly is two things: his friendship with Brian and his genius, and the increasingly complex relationship between those two elements. The genius keeps producing inventions that have enormous consequences. The friendship keeps producing moments that have unexpected emotional weight. He didn't stop being dark exactly, he just got more interesting. Brian and Stewie is season 8, episode 17. It aired May 2nd, 2010, and it aired commercial-free, which was unusual enough for the show that it signalled something. This is different, pay attention. The premise is simple. Brian and Stewie get locked in a bank vault over the weekend. Nobody is coming to rescue them before Monday. They have food, dog biscuits, and the contents of Stewie's diaper, the latter of which is handled in a way that's both disgusting and, in a strange way, illuminating about the characters. They have each other. There are no cutaway gags. There is no B-plot about Peter doing something destructive. There is no slapstick action, no villain, no invention that needs to be built or deployed. It is 22 minutes of two characters in a room having increasingly honest conversations. For a show that invented the cutaway gag as a pacing mechanism, this is a genuinely radical act. The episode starts with a degree of their usual dynamic, Stewie being imperious, Brian being wearily patient. And then, as the hours in the vault stretch on, and neither of them has anywhere to go or anything to perform for, something shifts. They run out of the stuff they normally use to keep each other at arm's length. They're just two people in a box. What comes out of these conversations is the most unguarded version of Brian that the show had produced to that point. Brian reveals that he has a gun in his safety deposit box. That's why they're in the vault to begin with. And he tells Stewie what the gun is for. It's for the day when he decides he no longer has a reason to continue. It's a suicide provision. Brian keeps it because he's afraid of what he might do without it, or perhaps because he's afraid of what he might do with it. The episode is a bit ambiguous about this deliberately, and Stewie, the character who once planned to kill this exact dog in various elaborate ways, makes Brian promise not to use it. The moment when Stewie extracts this promise is not played for laughs, it's played straight. There is something in Stewie's response to Brian's admission that is genuinely urgent. Not performed urgency, not villain urgency, real, uncomplicated care for another person. He doesn't want Brian to die. The idea of Brian dying is something Stewie cannot tolerate. What I find most striking about this scene is that Stewie doesn't try to fix it. He doesn't build a device to cure Brian's depression or engineer a scenario where Brian's life is suddenly better. He just makes him promise, and then he keeps it. He holds the knowledge of Brian's secret and sits with it, in the vault and presumably afterwards. That's not the response of the early season Stewie, the one who would have weaponized any piece of information he acquired. This is a different kind of relationship. For a character whose entire early identity was built around violence and the pursuit of death as a strategic tool, this is a quiet revolution. The episode ends with them still in the vault, the gun still in the box. They've reached an understanding. Nothing is solved. They're still stuck. Brian still has his depression. Stewie still has all his complicated interior architecture. But something has been established between them that the show would build on for the rest of its run. One other moment worth mentioning from this episode. At one point, Stewie looks at Brian and says, in a relatively unguarded way, that Brian is his only real friend. He says it without the accent going anywhere. He says it like he means it. He does mean it. For an episode where a baby cleans out a dog's digestive system using an improvised implement and they eat garbage for 2 days, it is a surprisingly moving piece of television. And it works because by season 8, the show had invested enough in this friendship that we believed in it. We understood what these two were to each other. And so, when the episode stripped everything else away and just put them in a room together, the room was full. This is a topic that's come up in discussions of Family Guy for as long as anyone's been having discussions about Family Guy, and it's worth addressing properly because the show's approach to it is more thoughtful than it sometimes gets credit for. MacFarlane has given conflicting answers about Stewie's sexuality in interviews over the years. In some, he suggested that Stewie is gay. In others, he's walked that back, saying the character is too young for sexual orientation to be a meaningful concept. In others still, he's described Stewie as operating in a kind of fluid, undefined space where the show retains the freedom to take him in any direction. The conflicting answers are probably not accidental. The inconsistency is the position. It's worth saying that the show's handling of this has evolved significantly across the decades. Early seasons used Stewie's ambiguous sexuality primarily as a comedic device, an incongruity that the show played with for quick jokes. Later seasons treated it with more genuine interest, letting it become part of Stewie's broader characterization rather than just a recurring punchline. The difference between how the show handled this in Season 2 and how it handles it in Season 18 is meaningful. What the show itself actually does is keep things genuinely open. There are episodes where Stewie shows interest in male characters. There are episodes where he pursues female characters. There are episodes where his romantic or sexual interiority doesn't come up at all. The show has never delivered a definitive statement, and I don't think it's going to. I actually think this ambiguity is doing something real, rather than just being evasive. Stewie is, at his core, a character about performance and persona. The accent, which we'll get to in detail later, is a costume. The villainy is a costume. The entire elaborate self-presentation is a construction designed to keep people from getting close enough to know him properly. Given all of that, giving him a clearly defined, confidently expressed sexual identity would feel like a betrayal of what the character is. He doesn't know himself that well. He hasn't let himself be known that well. His romantic inner life is as guarded as everything else. There's also the simple fact that he's a baby, which the show uses as a get-out clause when the question becomes inconvenient. He's too young for this to apply is not a satisfying answer to anyone who's been watching Stewie have sophisticated conversations about philosophy and mortality since 1999. But the show deploys it anyway when it needs to close a door. The fan discourse on this is predictably extensive. People have read the ambiguity in various ways, built various theories around specific episodes, argued about whether certain interactions constitute evidence of one orientation or another. The show has acknowledged this discourse occasionally with winking meta moments, which I generally find less interesting than the episodes that just let the ambiguity sit there without commenting on it. The most honest thing the show has said about this is probably in Send in Stewie, Please, which we'll get to in a later section. In that episode, Stewie talks about his feelings in ways that don't map cleanly onto any specific orientation. He talks about loneliness and connection and the difficulty of being known. The therapist doesn't ask about his sexuality. Stewie doesn't volunteer information about it. And somehow, that episode manages to feel like the most complete portrait of who Stewie is, without resolving a single one of these questions. There's a specific Season 4 episode, Barely Legal, where Meg has a crush on Brian, and Stewie's reaction to the various romantic complications of the episode is handled in a way that feels deliberately opaque. He's invested in the situation, he has strong opinions about it, but the nature of those opinions resists easy categorization. That opacity is very consistently maintained across the seasons, which is, again, very much on purpose. The show never committed because Stewie's entire identity is built around not committing. He keeps everyone at a distance. That includes the writers, the audience, and apparently himself. Season 12, Episode 21, Chap Stewie. The setup: Stewie gets fed up with the family's horseplay, destroying the television during his favourite programme. And rather than just expressing this frustration in the normal way, which for Stewie would involve some combination of threats and elaborate plans, he decides to use his time machine to go back and prevent his own conception. It's worth pausing on the specificity of this plan. Stewie doesn't go back to before Peter and Lois met. He doesn't change some large-scale historical event that would alter the family's trajectory. He surgically targets the specific series of domestic moments that led to his own existence, sabotaging Peter's access to pornography, shaving Peter's hair to provoke an argument, various carefully chosen interventions designed to break the connection between his parents at precisely the right moment. It's meticulous, it's clever, and it's coming from a place of genuine exhaustion with a family he simultaneously can't imagine living without. He succeeds. He stops Peter and Lois from having the argument they needed to have, that eventually led, via a fairly complicated emotional chain of events, to Stewie being born. Without that conception, a new Stewie is born instead, into a wealthy British family. The family has the accent, the class, the beautiful house, the cultural sophistication that Stewie's original persona seems to aspire to. He's reborn as Chap Stewie, and for a few minutes of the episode, things seem wonderful. And then they don't. His new brothers are cruel to him, genuinely, not comedically cruel. The kind of casual cruelty that wealthy families with too many heirs and not enough attention sometimes produce. His parents are largely absent, busy with the sort of engagements that wealthy British parents are busy with. He's left to be raised by staff, which sounds luxurious and turns out to be profoundly isolating. He's in the world he thought he wanted. He has the world his original persona seemed to be aiming for, and it's miserable. What the episode is doing is quietly explicit. Stewie's British aristocrat persona isn't an aspiration. It's a defense. He built it because it kept people at a distance, not because he genuinely wanted the life it implied. Given the actual life, the actual distance, the actual family that fits the persona, he wants nothing to do with it. He uses his new university access to build a rudimentary time machine, because even in an alternate timeline, Stewie is still Stewie, and he goes back. He finds his original self, tells him about the alternate life, and together they work to restore the relationship between Peter and Lois. They patch things up. Stewie says his goodbyes to his alternate self. He goes home, and once he's home, once he's back with the chaotic, loud, occasionally unbearable Griffin family, he's noticeably relieved. He doesn't say so directly, because that would be too easy, and Stewie doesn't do things the easy way. But you can see it. He spent his entire early life wanting to be somewhere else. The show gave him somewhere else, and he turned around immediately. There's something in this that connects back through the whole arc of what Stewie is actually doing underneath all the schemes and the accent. The British aristocrat persona, the voice, the vocabulary, the grandiosity, codes as aspiration. It looks like a character who wants to be somewhere more elevated, more sophisticated, more worthy of his intelligence. But Chap Stewie reveals that the persona is not a destination. It was never a destination. It's a costume that was built for reasons that have nothing to do with genuinely wanting to live in a manor house with indifferent parents and bullying siblings. He doesn't want to escape. He never did. What he wants is to matter to the people around him, to be seen by them, understood by them, chosen by them. The elaborate persona is not a route out of the Griffin household. It's the only strategy he has for getting their attention. The fact that the strategy has never quite worked, that the Griffin family still treats him as background furniture, even after all the plans and the accent and the inventions, is the tragedy at the middle of the character. He built the most impressive version of himself he could imagine, and the people he built it for mostly don't notice. He just hasn't quite figured that out yet. Or maybe he has, and that's the part he can't face. We need to talk about Life of Brian, which is Season 12, Episode 6, because it's one of the most important Stewie episodes the show ever made, even though Stewie isn't in the most active position for most of it. The episode is simple and devastating in equal measure. Stewie's time machine has just been destroyed. He'd smashed it himself, in a fit of pique, right at the start of the episode. It's worth noting this detail. Stewie doesn't lose the time machine through accident or external circumstance. He destroys it himself. The instrument that has defined much of his character's power and plot function across the series is gone because he lost his temper. And then almost immediately, Brian is killed. The car comes around the corner while they're playing street hockey in the street outside 31 Spooner Street. The moment is sudden and not drawn out. The show doesn't linger on it cinematically. Brian is hit, he's injured, he dies. And Stewie, who has used time travel to undo far lesser disasters, has no tool to fix it. He destroyed it himself. The irony is quiet and brutal. The Griffin family grieves in the ways that family tends to grieve, chaotically, inadequately, eventually. They adopt a new dog named Vinny, voiced by Tony Sirico of Sopranos fame, who is a decent character in his own right, and who the show never quite commits to, because the show knows, even as it's introducing him, what's going to happen. But here's the thing about Stewie in this episode, he can't fix it. The whole dramatic engine of Stewie's character for years had been his ability to solve problems with technology. Time machine broken? Build another one? Universe about to end? Overload the return pad. The tools were always there, and now the one moment that actually matters, the moment when Brian is gone and Stewie would give anything to undo it. The time machine is in pieces. He destroyed it, and he doesn't have time to rebuild one before Brian is simply gone. Stewie's grief in this episode is quiet and awful. He doesn't monologue about it. He doesn't build an elaborate plan. He just grieves badly, like a child who's lost the most important person in his world, because that is exactly what he is. And then in Christmas Guy, episode 8 of the same season, the show gives him a way through. It's 2 episodes later. Stewie is still sad. He's walking around a mall during the Christmas season. There's a lovely quiet quality to this part of the episode. Stewie among the holiday decorations and the shoppers and the seasonal music, just sad. And he encounters a past version of himself, a Stewie from a few weeks earlier who still has a working time machine and a return pad, and Stewie convinces his past self to give him the return pad. The conversation between present Stewie and past Stewie is one of the best scenes the show produced in these seasons. Present Stewie can't explain too much without creating paradoxes, but he has to convey enough that past Stewie will agree to hand over the device. What he conveys, essentially, is someone you love is going to die, and you will need this to save them. The past version of himself, who is himself, who has access to all the same emotional interior, understands immediately what this means. He agrees this requires some elaboration on the time travel mechanics, but the short version is, by taking the return pad from his past self, Stewie can go back to the moment before Brian was hit. He can save Brian, but his past self will be stranded, unable to return to the present. Stuck in the past, Stewie is essentially sacrificing one version of himself to save Brian. His past self agrees, and Stewie goes back. He saves Brian. He grabs him out of the street before the car comes. They go home. Brian is alive. The family gets their dog back. Vinny is written out. The timeline reasserts itself. The reaction to these episodes was remarkable. When Brian died, the fan backlash was genuinely intense. Petitions, protests, real expressions of grief for a fictional dog, which might seem disproportionate until you think about what Brian actually represents to a lot of people who've watched the show for years. A voice for a certain kind of melancholy intelligence, a character whose sadness and pretensions and genuine love for his family felt to many viewers like something real. And when Stewie brings him back, the relief is just as genuine as the grief was. What these episodes establish, more clearly than anything else the show had done, is what Brian means to Stewie. He's a character who spent years plotting to kill his mother. He built a time machine that created the universe. He took over the world in a computer simulation. And the moment that actually defines him, the definitive Stewie moment of the entire series, for my money, is a small boy standing in a shopping mall, giving up his only way home to save one friend. Season 16, Episode 12. Send in Stewie, please. Aired January 8th, 2018. This is the one. If you know the show, you know this episode. If you don't, I'm going to try to describe it accurately, but I want to say up front that description can only get you so far here. You have to watch it. The episode takes place entirely in a single room. A therapist's office. Stewie has been sent to see a child psychologist named Dr. Cecil Pritchfield, voiced by Ian McKellen, which is its own statement, because McKellen is an actor who built an entire career on the specific quality of measured, perceptive dignity. After an incident at preschool involving another child being pushed down the stairs, there are no cutaway gags, there is no B-plot, there is no slapstick. It is 22 minutes of a baby and a therapist in a room together, talking, just talking, and it is one of the most devastating pieces of television this show has ever produced. The choice of Ian McKellen is worth sitting with for a moment, actually, before we get into the episode itself. McKellen is most famous for playing Gandalf and Magneto, two characters defined by enormous power, held in check by wisdom and age. There's something in that casting that resonates. Pritchfield, like Gandalf and like Magneto, is a very old, very powerful presence facing a small but formidable adversary, and choosing not to overpower him, choosing instead to wait. The casting is probably a coincidence, or it's not. Either way, it works. Stewie enters the room fully armoured. He does what he always does when faced with something that might penetrate the persona. He performs. He analyses the therapist within the first few minutes of meeting him, deducing intimate details about his personal life, his marriage, his professional insecurities with the kind of rapid-fire Holmesian precision that Stewie deploys as a first line of defence. If he can establish that he is smarter than you, he doesn't have to be vulnerable to you. The intelligence is a weapon pointed outward. Dr. Pritchfield doesn't flinch. He doesn't rise to the provocations. He doesn't compete. He just waits with a patient, professional stillness that Stewie has no counter for. You can't outmaneuver someone who isn't trying to maneuver you. And very slowly, across the course of the episode, Stewie's armour starts to come apart. He talks about the other child, the one he pushed. He doesn't express remorse exactly. He's not built for straightforward remorse, but he reveals something about why it happened. The other child was different. He was gentle and uncomplicated, and the other children liked him in a way they don't like Stewie. And Stewie, who cannot bear to be liked less than someone else, reacted the way he reacts to most things that disturb him, with force. There's a particular quality to this revelation that the episode handles with real care. Stewie isn't explaining that he was bullied or excluded in a way that wins audience sympathy easily. He's explaining that he saw someone happy in a way he isn't, and he hurt that person. The show doesn't let him off the hook for that. Dr. Pritchfield doesn't let him off the hook for that. The conversation sits with the ugliness of it without turning Stewie into a monster, because the episode understands, and wants the audience to understand, that this is what fear looks like when it has nowhere else to go. And then Stewie says it, without flourish, without preparation, without the accent doing anything fancy. He says he's lonely. He cries. Not cartoon crying, not performed grief. Quiet, genuine tears from a child who has spent his entire conscious life building elaborate scaffolding to keep people from knowing he feels this way. And then the therapist, gently, asks about the accent. He drops the accent. Stewie speaks in his real voice. It's an ordinary voice. American, unremarkable. There is nothing theatrical about it, nothing that commands attention or signals superiority. It is the voice of a regular kid from Rhode Island. The moment when the accent drops is, I think, the single most powerful moment in 25 years of this show. Not the most dramatic moment, not the funniest or the most shocking. the most powerful. Because it's the moment when everything the show has been building, the persona, the performance, the whole elaborate construction, reveals itself as exactly what it always was: a child pretending. The accent was fake the entire time. Stewie tells Dr. Pritchfield that the persona, the British affectation, the villainy, the grandiosity, all of it is a coping mechanism. He built the character of Stewie Griffin because being himself, being ordinary, being just another kid in a town that doesn't particularly notice kids, was too frightening to face. He would rather be a cartoon villain than a real child, because real children are vulnerable and villains aren't. There's an irony in this that connects back to where we started. The voice is based on Rex Harrison playing Henry Higgins, a man whose defining project is transforming someone else's accent into something more acceptable. And Stewie built a Henry Higgins persona. He transformed his own voice into something more impressive. He did to himself what Higgins does to Eliza. And then, in a therapist's office in Rhode Island, the original voice came back through. For a few minutes, Stewie considers it. He considers putting the mask down and living without it. He sits with the possibility, quiet, almost tentative, of being known by someone. Really known, not just observed, of letting the real voice be the voice he speaks in. And then he doesn't. He puts the accent back on. He rebuilds the walls. He returns to the performance. Because the alternative is terrifying, and whatever the therapist knows or doesn't know, the wall is safer than the open space beyond it. And then the therapist begins having a heart attack. He collapses. He's dying, and Stewie watches. He doesn't call for help. He could call for help. He has access to the door, to other people, to a basic phone. He watches, and he lets the man die. Because if the therapist lives, someone knows. Someone has seen through the persona and can testify to what's underneath it. The mask was nearly removed, and the person who nearly removed it cannot be allowed to walk out of this room. The episode ends there. The therapist is dead. Stewie is alone. The accent is firmly back in place. He told the truth for 15 minutes, cried, and then killed the only witness. What makes this ending so uncomfortable and so right is that it doesn't let you read Stewie as either a monster or a sympathetic victim. He is both things simultaneously. He dropped the accent and showed you something real, and then he protected that real thing with the only tool he's ever had: violence. The love and the violence are not in contradiction. They come from exactly the same place. The love is why the violence was necessary. That's Stewie Griffin, a baby who created the universe, who saved his best friend at great personal cost, who chose an ordinary, chaotic family over a beautiful, empty one, and a child who is so terrified of being known that he let someone die to protect the secret of his own ordinariness. The show never went further than this. It didn't need to. This episode is the character. All of it. The armor and the grief and the intelligence and the loneliness and the violence. It's all in that room. After the therapy episode, which aired in season 16, the show had essentially said the deepest thing it was going to say about Stewie. It had shown you the inside. It couldn't unshow you. Every subsequent episode of Stewie being theatrical or villainous or elaborate carries the knowledge of that room, that accent dropping, that ordinary voice underneath. It's a strange position for a long-running show to put itself in. You can't unknow what you know, and yet the show has to keep going, because there are more seasons to produce, and Stewie is still one of the most popular characters on it. What the later seasons have done, mostly, is continue to let Stewie be himself, all the performance and the intelligence and the schemes, while occasionally allowing small quiet moments where something truer surfaces. It's a sustainable approach. The persona remains intact, but there are cracks in it now that weren't visible before season 16, and the show seems to know that we can see them. Season 14 has an episode that's worth mentioning specifically: the ADHD storyline. Stewie is diagnosed with ADHD, given a prescription for it, and the medication changes how he operates. He focuses differently. He's less scattered, less intensely theatrical, in ways that are initially presented as improvements and then complicate. He and Brian start abusing the medication, as people sometimes do, taking more than prescribed, chasing the initial productive clarity that eventually gives way to something less manageable. What I find interesting about this episode is what it implies about Stewie's baseline. His intensity, the planning, the elaborate schemes, the constant activity of his mind may not be purely volitional. His brain works a particular way. The ADHD diagnosis suggests that the relentlessness of his inner life, the quality that makes him both brilliant and exhausting, is at least partly neurological, which adds another layer to the question of what's performance and what's genuinely him. If the brain that produces the inventions and the schemes is also a brain operating under conditions that make stillness difficult, that makes sustained ordinary attention difficult, then the genius and the hyperactivity are the same thing looked at from different angles. The time machine and the medication abuse are not separate character traits. They're the same engine running hot. The episode doesn't belabor this point. It's a comedy, not a medical drama, and it resolves in the way Family Guy episodes resolve. But the implication sits there, quietly, underneath the jokes. Season 13 has a genuinely strange Stewie episode in The Simpsons crossover. The Simpsons Guy, where Stewie meets Bart Simpson. On paper, these should be the show's two most natural pairings. Both are cartoon children with anarchic energy. Both are played by female voice actors. Both are their respective show's most distinctive character. In practice, the episode uses the pairing largely for sight gags and doesn't dig very deep into what these two characters would actually make of each other, which is a shame. There's a version of that conversation I'd have loved to see. What would Stewie make of Bart? Bart is chaos without construction. He misbehaves for the pleasure of misbehaving, without the elaborate superstructure of plans and inventions and persona that Stewie has built. I think Stewie would find Bart simultaneously envious-making and slightly pitiful. I think Bart would find Stewie exhausting. No notes. In the seasons after the therapy episode, you can also see Stewie's relationship with Brian settle into something more comfortable and less charged. They're still the show's best pairing. They still have the adventures and the arguments and the musical numbers, but the friendship has a quality of being established now, of both parties knowing what they have. The early seasons dynamic, where Stewie was often the more demanding or threatening presence, has softened into something more genuinely equal. Brian is struggling and Stewie knows it. Stewie is complicated and Brian knows it. They hold this knowledge about each other without pressing on it too hard. There's a later seasons episode, season 19, Stewie's First Word, where the show does something that revisits the earliest premise of the character in an unexpected way. Stewie says an actual recognizable word in front of the family. The family reacts with enormous celebration, and the show plays with the gaps between what Stewie is and what the family perceives him to be, the way it always has, but with a warmth that the early seasons version of this joke didn't quite have. He's still the same character, still incomprehensible to most of the people around him. But the show, by this point, finds that fact touching rather than just funny. The Lois murder attempts, when they appear in later seasons, have a very specific quality. They feel like Stewie checking in on an old habit, reminding himself and the audience of who he used to be, or who he performs as. They don't have the commitment of the early seasons. They're a callback more than a genuine plot engine. And that's fine. Characters are allowed to grow past their original function. The question is whether what replaces it is interesting. And in Stewie's case, mostly, it has been. The Stewie-Lois relationship is the one that undergoes the most dramatic transformation across the show's run, even though, or maybe because, it's mostly happening underneath the surface, rather than being explicitly charted. In the early seasons, Lois is the primary target. She's the object of Stewie's most committed antagonism, the focus of his elaborate plans, the obstacle between him and whatever freedom he's convinced he's being denied. The reasons for this are satirically exaggerated, but emotionally real. She's the authority figure. She controls access to food, to sleep schedules, to mobility, to all the basic conditions of his existence. She decides when he eats and what and how much. She decides when he sleeps. She makes choices about his life without consulting him. The murder plots, at their most stripped down, are the fantasy of a very small person who has absolutely no power over the circumstances of his own life and can't stand it. It's also worth noting that early seasons Lois has a particular quality that makes her a compelling foil. She's genuinely capable. She's patient to a remarkable degree. She has real skills and intelligence, and she manages the Griffin household with a competence that Peter couldn't replicate. Stewie's antagonism toward her is therefore not the antagonism of someone picking on a weak target. It's more like two capable people in a structural conflict that one of them is too small to win. That's part of what makes it funny, and part of what makes it a bit sad. There's an episode in Season 5, like Stewie Loves Lois, that does something interesting with this. Following a medical procedure, Stewie becomes briefly and intensely devoted to Lois. He follows her around. He tells her she's wonderful. He wants to spend all his time with her. And the show plays it with a strange sincerity. This is what Stewie's love for Lois looks like when his defences are down. It's not complicated or ambivalent. It's just love, in the uncomplicated way young children love their mothers before they develop the complicated apparatus of their own identity. He snaps back to the murder plots by the end of the episode. The defences reassemble, but the episode has shown you what's underneath them, and the show knows you've seen it. There's a small moment in a later season's episode that I keep coming back to, though I'll be honest, I can't pin down exactly which episode it's from. I've watched a lot of Family Guy in preparation for this, and some of it has blurred together. But there's a scene where Lois does something kind for Stewie, something small and domestic, and his response is not to reach for a weapon or formulate a plan. He just sort of accepts it, quietly, and there's a flicker of something in his expression that the show doesn't underline or comment on. It's just there for a second, and then the episode moves on. That flicker is the whole relationship, really. All the murder plots and all the weapons and all the plans compressed into one moment of a child accepting his mother's kindness and not knowing what to do with it, except feel it. As the seasons go on and the Lois antagonism quietly recedes, what replaces it is a relationship that's more ordinary and stranger in equal measure. Stewie doesn't try to kill Lois. He doesn't particularly defer to her either. He exists in the family as a kind of parallel entity, present, connected, but operating on a frequency slightly removed from everyone else. There are moments in later seasons where Stewie expresses something that lands very close to love for Lois, without quite naming it. A concern for her well-being that surfaces unexpectedly. A protectiveness that's never articulated. The show handles these moments carefully, because committing to them too openly would require acknowledging the full reversal of Stewie's original character arc, which the show isn't quite ready to do and probably shouldn't be. But here's what I think the show has always known from the beginning and built into the character from the start. Stewie loves his mother. He always did. The murder plots are the elaborate, theatrical language of someone who hasn't developed the vocabulary to express something more direct. They're not the opposite of love. They're what love looks like when it's been filtered through the persona of a cartoon supervillain, who is also, underneath all of it, a child. Which is maybe not so different from being a regular kid. A lot of children are terrible at expressing how much they love their parents. They act out instead of asking for attention. They say the opposite of what they mean. They construct elaborate reasons for their frustrations that have nothing to do with the real frustration, which is simply that they need to be loved and aren't sure they are. Stewie's version of this is scaled up to include weapons and schemes, and time travel, but the emotional logic underneath it is completely recognisable. There's a long tradition in fiction of characters who express love through antagonism, who pick fights because engaging in conflict is the only intimacy they know how to initiate. Stewie fits into this tradition, although Family Guy would probably be annoyed if you made that comparison too seriously. But it's true. Every scheme to kill Lois is also a way of being in relationship with her, of making himself matter to her, of insisting, in the most dramatic terms available to him, that he exists and she has to reckon with him. He just wants to matter to her. He always did. Let's take a bit of a step back and think about what Stewie represents in the context of the show as a whole. Not just as a character, but as a function. What is Stewie for in Family Guy? He's the show's most technically ambitious element. This is worth saying plainly. When Family Guy wants to do something unusual, a format-breaking bottle episode, a philosophical argument, an episode with no cutaway gags, a meditation on loneliness, Stewie is usually the vehicle for it. He gets the episodes that the show is most proud of. Brian and Stewie was commercial-free. Send in Stewie Please is the 300th episode. The Road to Series, which is where the show consistently produces its most polished and emotionally coherent work, is always about Stewie and Brian. This tells you something about how the writers see him. He's not just a gag character, he's the character the show reaches for when it wants to prove it can do more than it usually does. Peter Griffin is the engine of the show, the chaos generator, the source of most of its broad comedy. But Stewie is the proof of concept. He's the writers saying, look what we can do when we try. He also functions as the show's conscience, in an odd way. Brian is usually credited with this role. He's the character who voices political and social opinions, who pushes back on Peter's more egregious behaviour. But Stewie is the character who sees through things. He perceives the family clearly, without illusion. He understands what each person is doing and why. He just usually doesn't interfere, because interfering would require revealing that he cares, and revealing that he cares is the one thing the persona can't accommodate. There's a specific quality to Stewie's perception that's worth naming. He sees the family the way a stranger would see them, because in a real sense he is a stranger. His intelligence and his emotional remove give him a vantage point that the rest of the family doesn't have. He watches Peter's impulsiveness and Lois's patience and Meg's loneliness and Chris's sweetness, and he understands all of it. He just can't act on that understanding without cost, so mostly he watches. One of the most persistent, unresolved questions in all of Stewie's 25 years is the hearing question. Who can actually understand him, and when? The show has been inconsistent about this on purpose, which is both frustrating and interesting. There are episodes where it's clear that adults cannot hear or process Stewie's speech. They respond to him with meaningless noises or with something adjacent to what he said, but clearly not a real engagement with it. There are other episodes where adults appear to understand him perfectly well and respond accordingly. There are episodes where Lois seems to hear him saying something alarming and proceeds not to react, which could mean she didn't register it, or could mean she's simply exhausted and has decided not to engage. The show doesn't resolve this. It can't, really, without closing off a productive ambiguity. The fan theory that's perhaps the most seductive on this question is the one that says, the other family members have always been able to hear Stewie, and simply found it easier not to engage with what he was saying. Not because they're bad parents, or not only because of that, but because what Stewie says is often so alarming that processing it would require a response they're not equipped to give. Ignoring a baby who's talking about weapons and world domination is, in a way, the rational choice if you don't know where to begin. This theory, if you accept it, adds something to the therapy episode that the episode doesn't quite say explicitly. When Stewie drops the accent and says he's lonely, maybe Lois has heard variations on this, in one form or another, for years, and hasn't known what to do about it, and this hasn't made it better for either of them. I don't know. The show doesn't say. But it's the kind of question that makes a character feel real, that the uncertainty is productive rather than just evasive. And there are other questions that circle the character just as persistently. Is the genius real and permanent, Or does it fade as Stewie approaches puberty? Is the accent real in some deeper sense, or was it always a construction? The show has left all of these deliberately open, and I think the openness is load-bearing. Stewie works because of the uncertainty. Pin him down too precisely, and the mystery collapses. The puberty question is the most interesting one to sit with, because it connects directly to the future Stu version of the character we saw in the DVD movie. Stu was ordinary. Stu had no particular genius, the implication being that whatever Stewie is right now, the intelligence, the inventions, the whole elaborate architecture of his inner life, it may be temporary, it may be a window, and when it closes, the kid from Rhode Island will still be there, with no particular accent and no particular gift, wondering why he used to feel so certain that he was destined for something. That is, when you think about it, quite dark. I mean that in the best possible way. The shadow of that movie hangs over the later seasons in a way that the show rarely acknowledges, but can't entirely escape. Stewie is still running from that version of himself. Every invention, every scheme, every road to adventure is in some sense the answer to the question. Will he become Stu? He keeps finding ways to avoid it. He creates the universe. He saves Brian. He drops the accent and picks it back up. He goes to an alternate timeline and comes home again. The show keeps giving him exits from ordinariness, and he keeps taking them. The fan theories around the therapy episode open up the most interesting territory. Because if the accent is fake and has always been fake, then the question of when Stewie adopted it, and why, at what age, under what circumstances, becomes genuinely interesting. He wasn't born speaking that way. At some point, a real child from Rhode Island decided to build this person. What was happening in his life at that moment? What did he need that the real voice couldn't provide? The show doesn't answer this. It can't, really, without undermining the character's fundamental inscrutability. But the question itself, the image of a very young child somewhere in Quahog, deciding to become someone else. That's the image the therapy episode leaves you with. And it's an image that resonates in ways that go beyond animated television. A lot of people build personas, not as elaborate as Stewie's, not as theatrical, not involving British accents and time machines. But the impulse to construct a version of yourself that is harder to hurt than the original, that keeps people at a useful distance, that makes you feel like you have some control over how you're perceived, that impulse is not unusual. It's actually quite ordinary. The extraordinary thing about Stewie is that he did it so thoroughly and so young that even he eventually forgot it was a construction, until a patient old man in a therapist's office waited long enough for the accent to fall away. What the show has done over 25 plus years is give us this body of work, a character who was supposed to be a gag and became something else, who started as a parody of an archetype and ended up, somewhere around season 16, being the most emotionally honest character in the show. He is the smartest person in Quahog. He is the reason the universe exists. He is a baby who will probably become ordinary when he grows up and will spend the rest of his life not knowing why he was once extraordinary. And he is a scared child who drops his accent in a therapist's office and then rebuilds the walls as fast as he can, because the walls are all he has. That's Stewie Griffin. Since we're talking about things the show uses to let Stewie be honest without actually being honest, we should talk about the music. Family Guy is a musical show in a way that doesn't always get acknowledged. It does elaborate production numbers. It parodies Broadway styles and Hollywood musicals and popular songs with genuine technical craft. Seth MacFarlane is a classically trained vocalist who has released albums of standards, and that background bleeds into the show constantly. And Stewie specifically gets the musical numbers. Not all of them, but the ones that matter. There's something about musical theatre as a form that suits Stewie perfectly, and I think the show understood this intuitively from fairly early on. Musical theatre is, at its core, a format where characters sing because their feelings are too large for spoken language. When someone in a musical breaks into song, it's because the emotion has exceeded the container of ordinary speech. They have to sing because talking isn't enough. Stewie is a character whose entire existence is about containing emotion within the container of a persona. He speaks elaborately and at length and with enormous precision, and the whole point of all that precision is to keep the real thing from getting out. But when he sings, in the road to episodes, in the various musical numbers across the show, the mechanism breaks down. The songs are where the real Stewie surfaces briefly before the persona reassembles. On the Road to Rhode Island is the clearest example of this. The song is not a performance. Nobody is watching Stewie and Brian sing it in that field. There's no audience, no strategic purpose, no reason to perform. They just sing it because they are in a moment that calls for music, and what comes out is genuine. The warmth in that sequence, the pleasure Stewie takes in being with Brian, the ease of it. These are not qualities the Stewie of the early seasons usually allows to show, but put a melody underneath them, and they come through. The Road to Europe episode has a musical sequence where Stewie and Brian are performing in a Viennese theatre. I'm slightly misremembering the specifics. The show has a lot of episodes and they blur, but the dynamic is the same. The performance framing, paradoxically, allows Stewie to be more himself. When everyone knows it's a performance, the pressure to maintain the persona off stage relaxes slightly. He can sing something real, and it's protected by the theatrical context. There's a larger tradition here that the show's probably not consciously invoking, but that Stewie fits into anyway. The theatrical child who uses performance to process experience. Children who grow up in theatre often describe it as a space where they were allowed to feel things that weren't permitted in ordinary social contexts. The stage gave them permission. Stewie doesn't have a stage exactly. He has a persona, which is a kind of permanent performance, but the music functions the same way. It's the gap in the armour through which something real escapes. The show also uses music for some of its more directly comedic Stewie moments, the evil monkey theme, various villain songs in the early seasons, elaborate production numbers that are playing the evil genius aesthetic for laughs, rather than revelation. These are different from the road to musical moments. The villain songs are armour, same as everything else. They're Stewie performing being Stewie. The quiet duets with Brian are something else. There's an episode, Road to the North Pole, where Stewie and Brian sing together in a way that's noticeably more melancholy than the usual road to musical numbers. They're exhausted. The trip has been longer and harder than expected, and they're somewhere cold and far from home. And the song they sing together has a quality of two tired people being honest about being tired. The entertainment industry calls this 11 o'clock number, the late in the show song where a character has run out of pretense and is finally telling the truth. That's what it is. And it's Stewie specifically who lets the exhaustion show. I've got a whole separate video I keep meaning to do just on the music in Family Guy, because there's genuinely a lot to say about it. The show takes its musical moments seriously, even when it's being absurd about them, and Stewie's relationship to music specifically is rich enough to carry a full discussion. But for tonight, the short version is this. The songs are when you're most likely to see the real Stewie. Pay attention to what he sings and how he sings it, and you'll learn things the dialogue doesn't tell you. Before we get to the closing, there's one relationship we haven't talked about properly. Stewie and his stuffed bear, Rupert. Rupert has been with Stewie since the beginning. He's a largish teddy bear, off-white, slightly threadbare in the way childhood toys become when they're genuinely loved rather than just owned. And Stewie's relationship with Rupert is, in its way, the most revealing thing about the character that doesn't involve a therapist's office or a bank vault. Rupert can't hear Stewie either. In this sense, he's like most of the family, a recipient of Stewie's communication who gives nothing back. But the difference is that with Rupert, Stewie doesn't perform. There's no audience to perform for. Rupert is just a stuffed bear, and Stewie knows this. And yet the conversations he has with Rupert, the things he says to him in the privacy of his room when nobody else is around, are some of the most candid moments the character has. Because Rupert is safe, Rupert cannot be hurt, cannot judge, cannot leave, cannot reveal what he knows. And so Stewie, in conversation with his bear, becomes something closer to himself than almost anywhere else in the show. The Road to Rupert episode, which we touched on briefly in the Road to section, is interesting precisely because of how much Stewie's distress at losing Rupert reveals. He tracks the bear across the country, to Aspen as it turns out, which is where Brian sold him, with a dedication that's hard to square with the persona of a hardened supervillain. This is not a villain going on a mission. This is a small child who lost the thing that made him feel safe, going to get it back. The episode doesn't try to make this more than it is. It doesn't deliver a monologue about what Rupert means. It just shows Stewie's urgency, which is eloquent enough. There's a broader point here about the things Stewie allows himself to need. He has constructed an identity specifically designed to need very little. The supervillain needs no one, depends on no one, requires nothing from the people around him except their eventual submission. But the persona leaks. It leaks through Brian. It leaks in the Vault episode, in the therapy episode, in the quiet moments when the show isn't trying to be funny. And it leaks most consistently through Rupert, who exists permanently in the space before the persona and therefore sees the version of Stewie that existed before the accent. Whether there literally was a version of Stewie before the accent is one of those questions the show won't answer. But Rupert is the physical representation of that possibility. He's the thing Stewie carried with him from whatever came before the performance. And Stewie has kept him all this time, which is, in its way, an act of tremendous honesty about what he actually needs. The stuffed bear is also, quietly, a note of reassurance that the show provides. For all of Stewie's elaborate psychological architecture, for all the weapons and the plans and the loneliness and the violence, there is a teddy bear in his room. It's been there the whole time. And every time the show shows us Rupert, it's reminding you that inside the supervillain persona is the original child. Not the accent, not the genius, not the ambition. Just a kid who needs something to hold on to, which is, when you think about it, most of us. There's a version of everything we've talked about tonight that reads as quite dark. And some of it is. The therapy episode is dark. The bank vault is dark. The future Stew is dark in its own quiet way. But the show has always threaded this darkness with something that stops it from being bleak. A consistent undercurrent of warmth, of attachment, of the world going on, and people being in it together, even when they're terrible at saying so. Stewie stays in Quahog. He keeps coming home. He saves Brian. He misses Rupert. He drops the accent and then picks it back up, which is sad, but he also dropped it, which means the real voice is still there, still accessible, still capable of being heard by the right person, under the right conditions. That's enough. For a character, for a show, for a person. That's probably enough. There's also something gentle in the Rupert relationship that the show earns by never being precious about it. The stuffed bear is not treated as a sacred object. He gets lost. He gets involved in plots. He's occasionally used as a prop in something absurd, but he's always there. He keeps appearing in Stewie's room in the background of scenes, slightly rumpled, sitting on whatever surface is nearest. He is the one constant in a character whose life is defined by transformation and performance and impermanence. And the show understands, without underlining it, that this constancy means something. Every character who keeps a childhood object into adulthood, or in this case, into an indefinitely extended babyhood, is telling you something about what they needed and what they still need. Rupert is Stewie's answer to that question, sitting quietly on a shelf in a house in Quahog, waiting. It's worth stepping back before we close and thinking about where Stewie sits in the broader landscape of animated television. Because there have been other animated children, other cartoon geniuses, other characters who occupied an unusual position in an otherwise domestic show, and none of them quite did what Stewie does. Bart Simpson is the obvious comparison, and the show itself invited it with the Simpsons crossover episode. Bart is chaotic, rebellious, funny, occasionally kind in ways that surprise you. But Bart doesn't have an inner life that the show is exploring. He's a behaviour pattern more than a psychology. When Bart does something mean, it's because the plot needs him to. When Stewie does something mean, it's because of something the show has been building since season 1 about who he is and what he needs and what he's afraid of. Those are very different operations. Dexter from Dexter's Laboratory, another animated boy genius with a secret lab and an oblivious family, is closer in structure but fundamentally lighter in approach. Dexter's show is comedy about the gap between his self-perception and his actual situation. Stewie's show eventually becomes something more uncomfortable, a comedy about why a small child built a persona in the first place. Jimmy Neutron, Phineas Flynn, various animated geniuses across the decades. None of them get the therapy episode. None of them get the Vault episode. None of them have their accents stripped away to reveal an ordinary American child underneath. They're bright kids in adventure formats. Stewie is something more ambivalent, a character that the show eventually decided to take seriously. The closest analogue I can think of in animated television is actually not a child character at all. It's BoJack Horseman, the animated Netflix series about a washed-up cartoon horse actor who is deeply, elaborately unhappy and uses performance and substance and a specific kind of brittle wit as defense mechanisms against acknowledging that unhappiness. BoJack Horseman and Stewie Griffin have nothing to do with each other tonally. One is an adult prestige drama. The other is a Fox animated comedy that has been on the air since 1999, but they share a structural concern. Both are about characters who built versions of themselves that are easier to inhabit than their real selves, and both shows eventually crack those personas open to show you what's underneath. Family Guy did this with Stewie in one 22-minute episode in season 16. BoJack Horseman did it across 6 seasons. The approach is different, the depth is different, the follow-through is different, but the recognition that animated characters can carry this kind of emotional weight, that comedy can be the vehicle for something genuinely dark and real, that recognition connects them. What Family Guy gets credit for in the context of Stewie specifically is the long game. The show wasn't designed to tell Stewie's story. It was designed to be a comedy about a family in Rhode Island. Stewie was a satirical device, and over 25 years of episodes, the character accumulated enough history and enough genuine investment from his writers that he became something the show hadn't planned to make, a genuinely moving portrait of a child who built an impenetrable self, and then once, in a therapist's office, let someone see behind it. That's rare. In any form of fiction, that's rare. In a prime-time animated comedy that also contains elaborate chicken fight sequences and Conway Twitty cutaways, it's remarkable. There's also something worth saying about what Stewie's existence, specifically the therapy episode's success, did for animated television more broadly. The episode aired in 2018 and won Emmy nominations. It demonstrated to writers, rooms across the industry, that you could take an absurdist animated character and do a single-room psychological drama with him, and audiences would not only accept it, but respond with genuine emotion. That's a permission that has rippled outward. You can see the influence of that format break in various subsequent animated shows' willingness to slow down and go deep. Stewie is not just a character in a show. In other words, he's a proof of concept, a demonstration that animated comedy can go where it usually doesn't go, can say what it usually doesn't say, can earn the kind of feeling that it usually outsources to live-action drama. Not by abandoning comedy, Send In Stewie Please is very funny in its first act, but by trusting that the comedy and the genuine emotion are not in contradiction. They're made from the same material. The same material, it turns out, as the character himself. A joke that became real. A performance that revealed something true. A baby with a football-shaped head and an accent that wasn't his own, and a laboratory full of things nobody noticed, who turned out, against all probability, to be one of the most interesting people in Quahog. No notes. And one last thing, since we're here, if you've never watched a Family Guy episode specifically because of tonight's video, if something in what we talked about made you curious in a way you weren't before, the therapy episode is the place to start. Season 16, episode 12, 22 minutes, no previous context required. It tells you everything you need to know about who this character is, in a room, with a patient old man and a bear on a shelf, somewhere back home. And so, that's the whole story, or as much of it as you can tell without running the show from the beginning all the way to the current season in real time, which would take considerably longer than this video and would probably defeat the purpose of a sleep video somewhat. We started with Seth MacFarlane at 24, pitching a show he'd half invented in film school and a character he'd designed as a satirical device. A joke, a cartoon evil genius, the incongruity of a baby with a British accent and a ray gun. And we've ended up here with a character who has accumulated 25 years of history and turned out to contain more than anyone initially intended, including probably the people who created him. This is the thing about long-running television. You put a character into enough situations, and eventually they start to reveal themselves. Not because you planned it, not always, but because the accumulated weight of all those episodes creates a kind of archaeology. If you dig down through the seasons far enough, you find layers that the early seasons didn't know they were depositing. The therapy episode is the clearest example of this in Stewie's case. It's an episode that couldn't have existed in season 1. Because season 1, Stewie didn't have enough built up around him to sustain it. The room would have been empty. By season 16, there were 25 years of material in that room with him, and the conversation he had with Dr. Pritchfield was a conversation about all of it. The questions the show leaves open about Stewie are going to stay open. That's fine. The best characters in long-running fiction are the ones who retain their mystery, who feel real enough that you could have new thoughts about them. New angles on the same material, years after you've watched the same episodes for the third or fourth time. Stewie has that quality. I've been thinking about him more carefully than is probably warranted for several weeks now, in preparation for this video, and I'm still finding things to notice. One thing I keep coming back to, in a quiet way, is the word ordinary. It appears so often in Stewie's story. Stew, the future self, is ordinary. The alternate British family, without the chaos of the Griffins, is ordinary in its coldness. The real voice, the American voice, the Rhode Island voice, is ordinary. The thing Stewie is most afraid of, and the thing the show keeps bringing him back to, is the possibility of ordinariness, of being unremarkable, of being the kind of person that the world doesn't particularly shape itself around. And I wonder sometimes whether the appeal of Stewie for audiences is partly this, that he names a fear that most people carry around but don't have language for. The fear of being ordinary, of trying very hard and finding out that you're not exceptional, of building a persona and having it fail to make you matter as much as you needed to matter. Stewie's response to this fear is extraordinary. The inventions, the accent, the plans, the whole elaborate production. Most people's response is smaller and quieter, and I suspect the show knows this. That's part of why the therapy episode lands the way it does. Because when Stewie drops the accent and says, in a plain voice, that he's lonely, that's not a cartoon baby having an unusual moment. That's the fear speaking plainly for once, and most people in the audience have met that fear somewhere. The show keeps going. Stewie keeps going. He's in Quahog right now, in whatever the current season is, doing something that is probably both impressive and alarming. Brian is probably nearby, Rupert is on the shelf, the lab is operational, the walls are up, and somewhere in the back of the house at 31 Spooner Street, there's an ordinary kid from Rhode Island who built something extraordinary around himself, and then forgot, mostly, that he was the one who built it. That's a kind of thing worth knowing about a character, worth spending a couple of hours with, on a quiet night. If you're still awake at this point, which is perfectly fine, some nights are just like that, you might want to go back and watch some of the episodes we talked about tonight. Brian and Stewie is a good starting point if you've never seen it. Send in Stewie Please is essential. The road to episodes you can do in any order. They're mostly self-contained. And if you want something that requires nothing from you at all, just put on the multiverse episode and let it run. If you're drifting though, if the voice has become something in the background and the thoughts are starting to get slower and softer at the edges, that's exactly where this is supposed to take you. There's nothing coming that requires you to be awake for it. Stewie will still be in Quahog whenever you want to find him again. Brian will still be there with his martini and his unpublished manuscripts and his quiet sadness and his genuine love for one very strange small person. The accent will still be in place. The walls will still be up. But somewhere in the room, if you're listening at the right time, you might catch a moment when the performance slips slightly. A flicker of the real voice. A glance at Rupert. A song that says something the dialogue never would. And then the walls go back up and the accent returns and Stewie Griffin continues to be exactly the character he's always performed being. That's the story. It's a good one. Sleep well.